All right, y'all. So, hey, Jackie, how are you?
Good.
Awesome. Figured we'd just do a quick catch up. I know yesterday's growth meeting, there was a lot of conversation about a number of different things. Number one, I wanted to just make it really easy for people to have access to the MR. I believe it's been merged. I'm going to double check it right now. I think Hila was going to merge it yesterday, the last comments I saw from her. Looks like it's still open, so still working through it there. But so anyway, but yeah, what I wanted to do is just make sure everybody had access to this MR and felt like they could contribute and really kind of understand the direction that expansion's going in. Really, there's been a big shift, and not to just repeat everything we talked about yesterday, but we're going to shift from net retention, and we're going to start focusing on basically user growth. The KPI is going to be existing customer month-over-month user growth rate, and it's pretty simple to get to that number. Basically, you take the number of users added to existing customers in an existing month, you minus the previous month's existing customers, and then you divide it by the previous month. That gives you your existing user growth rate. Pretty straightforward. I think there's a number of different ways for us to approach it. What I want to do before we just start coming up with a bunch of ideas on how we can improve it is to kind of hear from you all, like, how do you feel about this this KPI, and then we can go from there.
Tim, I guess I'll go first. I'm not exactly sure how this affects where I sit specifically. I think as long, if we have more experiments coming through, that'll be a good thing. If that enables us to do that, then there's probably enough to do in this area to keep us busy with this change in scope.
Awesome. Jeff, what are your initial thoughts?
I mean, I'm on board. To be perfectly honest, I haven't thought about this too deeply, just because I cover all of growth. So I've had to sort of digest like all of the KPI changes. And so I'm sort of still wrapping my brain around them. My initial reaction is yeah, it makes sense. Like when I think about KPIs and like trying to measure success like this, there's always a sort of push and pull between what the ideal KPI is in a conceptual sense and what we can measure in a very real, literal sense. And I think if we feel like this gets us to a better balance of those things, then it's a good thing. But I tend to not have such strong opinions on like business-oriented KPIs. I tend to more kind of think more about like product-focused KPIs. And so like if we feel like this is a better way to think about our success from like a revenue and business perspective, then I'm on board with that.
Cool. So really, it sounds like both y'all are on board, and it's really less about the business KPIs and more about just having something that we can measure and kind of work towards, right? And just keep that flow of work going. That's at least how I'm reading it, and that's kind of how I feel too. I think it's important that everybody understands the KPIs and how we can influence them, and feel like we can do good work. That's all. Jackie, what are your thoughts?
I like how simple it is to understand what's being measured. My only question is kind of like, if we're measuring new users, so we're measuring like how many users are added each month, right? But I could see that might encourage like a very heavy focus on that might discourage like focusing on really engaging those users? Like maybe if it's just about adding a lot of people, well, who's to say whether or not those people are actually engaging much with the product? Maybe we're just adding them and then they're not really doing much. So I was just interested in what your thoughts were about that and how you would maintain focus on that too.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, because it's one thing to just fill the funnel or fill up a product with a bunch of users, but if those users aren't really doing anything, what's the point? And I get the sense that Gila's already kind of made a suggestion around, what if we were to step back and really think about the growth funnel as just pick one exercise inside of GitLab, right? And that could be the new user onboarding flow or the new user experience. You'll hear it referenced in like books and blogs as the NUX. He was really strong there and has a bunch of good ideas on how we can basically do it and then measure it. And what that really drives towards, Jackie, is that engagement and retention rate. So I feel like there's probably going to be like a step 2 to this. Get out of the gate, the reason why we did this was just because the existing KPIs we had were too broad. They weren't narrow focused enough. And really we were asked to just make a decision kind of on the call there. So with Sid last week. So that's kind of how it all shook out. And now we have this kind of set KPIs that came out of it. My gut tells me that they're gonna probably go through another iteration and we'll have other things to work on. So in the interim, what I'd like to do is just say, okay, it's seat expansion. We're gonna focus on this existing customer month-over-month user growth rate and build against that. And I feel like there are some basic things that we can do between now and how all of this stuff shakes out. And even if it doesn't and we stay with the KPI, we'll still be able to build against. And it's almost kind of like just not a reset, but I want to start by doing some research around how users are added to the platform for existing customers. Is it through groups? Is it through projects? Are there other paths? How are existing customers doing this today? And I feel like there could be some pretty good, UX research work that's done there. And then in addition to that, Mate's already kind of got a jump on, how users, but basically the invite user flow of existing users of GitLab and then also non-existing users of GitLab. So I feel like there are some there's some quick work that we could do there if we just wanted to only focus on that type of work. And that's inviting users inside of GitLab. Where I feel like I need to spend a little bit more time really understanding this is, how do those users convert from being active users on GitLab in the time frame before the billing cycle hits, right? So before their renewal date. And what's happening during those times? Are there things that we can do during that period of time before renewal happens to message existing customers around, hey, adding more users, or you have this many users, are you prepared to make this renewal investment? There's probably a lot of stuff there that we could focus on too, whether it be, experimenting with new copy or messaging, some of the emails that are going out to the existing customers. And that's just customer facing. And then I feel like there's probably some internal stuff that we can do as well, and just keeping our sales reps notified inside via Salesforce, working on that API to make sure that they have access to this information and saying like, hey, did you know that 7 or 8 customers in your existing book of business have a utilization rate that's way outside what they signed up for, and they're going to be up for renewal anytime now. So I feel like there's some stuff that we can do there too. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of where my head's at. I feel like we've already started down this path, but I definitely would like to get some of Jeff's time if you don't mind.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, I think a lot of what you're describing is best attacked initially through data analysis. Like, this idea of like user invite behavior, like I think we want to understand that at the aggregate level. Matej brought this up in our design sync yesterday about wanting to understand the relative frequency of individual user invites versus group invites to projects and groups. So I actually started building out a query for that. It looks like we do have that data. And so I'm looking at that. I can already tell that, as you might expect, individual user invites are far more common than group invites. If I pulled my numbers right, it looks like there's about on the order of 200 group invites to other groups for all of GitLab.com in a weekly basis. So obviously that's not a lot. So yeah, I can dig in that, but I think like what you're describing is best attacked from a data perspective. And then once we have data, basically the what, we can use UX research and potentially qualitative interviews to better understand some of the aspects of why, or if need be, how. But what I don't want to do is try to establish like overarching behaviors or relative frequencies of behavior, like using like 6 or 8 qualitative interviews, because I think it potentially could lead us down some misleading paths. And I want to get us into this kind of process of like, let's understand things at an aggregate level, and then when we see aggregate level behaviors that we don't understand, we can dig into that with more in-depth qualitative discovery. And so, yeah, I think we can definitely work on that, and I'm on board with that. I want to ask one clarifying question about like some of the things that we used to sort of emphasize in terms of expansion that it seems like now we're not. So how do we think about expansion in terms of plan upgrades and add-on purchases? Because this new KPI doesn't really account for either of those things. If I have 50 users on bronze and I go to 50 users on silver, previously that we considered that, you know, something expansion wanted to try to influence. Likewise, purchase of CI add-on minutes. With a seat growth KPI, neither of those things is factored in.
That's right, and it's done by design. So that was a decision made, I feel like, just to make sure we are more focused and say, okay, like let's just go focus on this one thing for this period of time. Right now we don't have a time box for it, so we don't know how long it's going to be, but we focus on seat expansion. But at least it gives us something that's really, really focused. It almost felt like we were distracted in a number of different areas, you know, and there's so many things to work on here at GitLab. If you don't stay maniacally focused on 1 or 2 things, you can really kind of go off into a pasture and do all kinds of stuff. And you know, we had a really good way to organize what we wanted to work on, but the business KPIs that we were measuring towards, we couldn't really influence that number. So it was hard for us to see like cause and effect or change in what happened after we did something. We could do it like in these kind of like, you know, these micro expressions, but it didn't like move the needle in any way. So the thinking here is, if we can get super focused on like 1 or 2 things, let's just get focused on one thing. We just call it seat expansion. And how do we do that? And then go solve that problem. Then we can say, okay, well, we solved that problem. Now, like, let's move on to upgrades if that's something that we want to focus on. And I think it'll help us.
Okay.
It'll just,
yeah, I guess just really the question I was asking is like, is any team going to pick up those concepts, or are we just going to de-emphasize those concepts for the time being?
Yeah, at this time they're being deprioritized. That's
Okay.
my understanding.
I mean, I think CI minutes, like, I don't think the opportunity there is huge. I do think plan upgrades is like, I do think there's an opportunity there, because from what I've seen, like, as your needs progress, the propensity to go from plan A to plan B increases. Like once you think, oh, I need merge approvals, or oh, I need epics, or oh, I need security functionality, whatever that may be, then it's like, okay, well, maybe we do need to get, and I think there's also like a narrative you can spin of, okay, well, your entire org doesn't have to be on silver, but maybe this team needs to be on silver. And so rather than having 100 people on bronze, you can have 80 people on bronze and 20 people on silver. And then there's a natural sort of evolution of that, of, you know, silver starts taking over that organization over time. So I get like the sort of singular focus, that makes sense to me, but I do think there is still opportunity from an expansion perspective for plan upgrade in particular.
Yeah.
I think
Which
CI
is,
minutes is always going to be kind of small potatoes.
yeah. It was a good place for us to start, and just kind of exercise together.
Yeah,
I thought that was
it's
pretty
real
good.
money, but I think like it's not, you know, it's not recurring. It's
Yeah. Noted, duly noted. So number 2, what I'm going to be working on is basically just kind of resetting the roadmap, getting things a little bit more organized. I'll keep everybody up to date. Just, you'll see a bunch of things moving around on the boards. If you have any questions about them, just ping me. But what I'm going to do is just reprioritize everything that has to do with seed expansion. I'll probably create some new issues around research and potentially some UX scorecarding. Jackie, I think that might be. What's your thought around just creating a UX scorecard for the invite members flow? Is it too small of a flow? Is it not? Does it not deem a UX scorecard review, or are we even doing scorecard reviews anymore?
We are, yeah, still a thing for sure. I would ask Matei and kind of let him make that call. My guess is that the work he's already done has been quite scorecard-ish, but maybe just not formally as a scorecard. I know he's done like the walkthroughs of those workflows and analyze them. So it may be that he could just easily create a scorecard issue and kind of just document the thought process that he's already done. If that's the case, it might be worth doing it, because then we can, you know, track the improvements to the scorecard, and that might be nice just for like kind of following up with strategically like what we're actually solving for. So yeah, just check with him. Let him make that call. I think we could go either way.
Okay, cool. Yeah, what I like about it is that it gives us a baseline. You know.
Exactly. We have a baseline. We need some changes. We know we made those changes to improve that baseline, and then we can look again and see how we did.
Awesome. I will. And then on number 3, I think that there's an opportunity for us in the interim to just finish any work that we feel really strongly about. I've prioritized most of it in the backlog. If there's anything out there that, Doug, if you see anything that is interesting to you, or if Matei sees anything that's really interesting, I don't want people to lose any passion around the work that we're doing as we shift. So if we feel strongly about something, I really want to make sure that we get it done. And just knowing that I'm resetting the backlog, so we're going to get new stuff coming through the pipe anyway. Number 4 is really, I've been digging into the data for seed expansion specifically. And what I've done, I've created basically a dashboard that shows us user growth rate, and it's done at the month-over-month level. But really the fun part of this one is the fun part of this exercise was when I dumped it into an Excel or a Google Sheet. And what I did was I broke it out by basically all of the different dimensions that are available to us at a very high level. Here, I'll share my screen just so that way I'm walking you all through this the right way. Can you all see this okay? So up here, what you'll see is just basically a summary of seed expansion growth rates. I've done this 3 different ways. One is by sales type. So up here, you're seeing combined, self-service, and sales assisted. Combined is obviously both self-service and sales assisted. Self-service is exactly what it sounds like. Users going to the admin panel, they're then going to the customer portal and then checking out. Sales assisted is when our sales organization has to go through the actual motion with them. Then I broke it down by all products, and then delivery is SaaS and self-managed. All products delivery is SaaS, and then all products delivery is self-managed. So we could see the difference here of how efficient people are being on SaaS versus self-managed, and where there might be some opportunity to influence things. I think if the self-managed business had an easier way to self-serve, we would be able to move this number pretty dramatically. If you could think about bringing some of the billing workflows into the actual application on the admin panel, that makes it easier for people to then add seats during checkout, there could be an opportunity there. So I think that's like the first real like learning that I had when I looked at this data. But then what I did was I actually broke it out into a bunch of different tables. These are the higher level data tables, but down here I broke it down by delivery and products over self-serve versus sales assisted. And you can see the number of user counts and then the user growth rates month over month. And it's pretty telling. I haven't done a lot of calculus in the lower half of this spreadsheet yet, but where I have spent a lot of time is up here, kind of at this macro level. And then what I'm going to do is take it one step further and say, okay, it's probably self-managed, self-service premium users who could move the needle the most for us. That's my initial inclination. And then building around that, I think is going to be really, really fun.
Hey, Tim, for self-managed, in terms when you're saying user growth rate, are you measuring that at the point of renewal, or like, because self-managed people can add users whenever they want without us necessarily knowing about it, and that only gets reconciled at a true up or a renewal?
Yeah, so this is done when the renewal closes. So the numbers I'm pulling are based on what they've paid for.
So it's a year for self-managed, at least. That's arguably a year-over-year increase. If you're looking at relative increase, because like
for that
I'm a customer,
yeah,
I get a license for 50 people. A year later, I get a new license for 60 people. And so we're looking at that in aggregate month over month. But for the individual customers, that's actually like year over year, typically, at least for self-managed.
That's right, and it's the same thing for our SaaS customers as well. They don't have to renew their license when they add new users. I think they're prompted to. Actually, I don't even think they're prompted to pay for them. So there's an opportunity there too.
You were capped, but maybe I don't know. Something else I noticed. So it looks like self-service has a higher growth rate than sales assisted. Is there an argument for pushing more of these transactions that would normally be sales assisted towards a self-managed flow? Like, would we be better served by having an interface handle these rather than a salesperson?
That's the inclination, right? And I think we need to explore that a little bit more deeply. So kind of back to your point around data, this is like my first pass at it. We have user counts after they've upgraded or after they've renewed, and that's what we're analyzing today. What we're not seeing, or what we don't have a good handle on, is when people are adding users to their license, midterm, right? And what those behaviors and motions look like. And I think they're two very different things. So there's obviously a lot more research that needs to be done there. And then I think number 5, Doug, it looks like you've got one here. Do you want to just verbalize for me?
Yes, I'm still not clear how to use the experiments table or how we want to use it in that specific issue. But perhaps I need to collaborate with engineers who have a bit more understanding of what I need to do.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, like, the feedback that I've been getting from Gila is that, hey, why don't we use this new experiments table that Sam and Jensen cooked up? I think Mike has used it once for the what's new experiment. It's only been used a handful of times. So I think it's important for us to at least go through the exercise and figure out how to do it. If you don't mind reaching out to some of those engineers to figure out, what they've done with it and how they rolled it out, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
really,
thank you. I guess the the technical part isn't as much of a mystery as to the conceptualization around it, but perhaps that's just my ignorance around control groups and stuff like that in general.
Yeah.
I
All
believe
right,
it's just a subset of the overall snowplow events. It's basically because like snowplow events tables are hard to query because they're so huge, and so it's basically segregating experiment events into their own table to make them a bit more manageable, is my understanding.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't seem like it adds too much value.
I mean, I think it also just like it streamlines some of how the events are shown in the warehouse. I think before, like experiment status was in like a JSON object, and so you had to like parse a JSON object, and so it like, I believe, and I haven't looked at this thoroughly, it puts those cleanly into columns, and so you can clearly say like where condition equals control or whatever, rather than like JSON parse da 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 da. That's my understanding. I don't believe we're pushing any new data. I believe we're just transforming existing snowplow data to be easier to consume.
Okay. Well, Doug, we can work through it together.
Okay.
Yeah. All right,
I
y'all.
there's just something about control group I didn't understand, like one person's in it or one person's not. Before, we've always just been tracking, like, if it's enabled for a user, then we're going to get the event if they click on it, type of a concept.
Yeah, we've been going at it. We've just been taking a different approach that basically gives us the same read, just in a less finished way, I guess. That's the best way I can describe it. But all right, y'all, it's 11. I don't want to keep anybody past our time. Nice background, Doug. Bye, y'all.